When we as physicians look at things like the time change that happens seasonally, we look at it from the perspective of scientific literature and the medical evidence. And so when we switch during this time of year to daylight saving, we actually end up losing an hour of sleep in the morning, which is, of course, why it's one of our most favorite times of the year. Facetiously. But the other important point is that it flies against our body's natural clock or circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm normally is to be exposed to bright light early in the morning and to darkness in the evening, and that goes along with what's considered a healthy sleep schedule. Now, when you have daylight savings, what happens is the opposite of that. You actually end up with less sun in the morning and more light in the evening. So it's harder for you to wake up and it's more difficult for you to go to sleep. And because of that, there are knockdown effects on the rest of your body's systems. So from a medical standpoint, when we compare the seasonal time change from daylight savings to, for instance, standard time in spring, when we spring forward, we do notice that there's a lot of adverse health effects that can occur. And some of those have to do with an increased risk of hospitalization for cardiovascular events like AFib, an increased risk of myocardial infarction, an increased incidence of stroke. There's an increase in traffic fatalities that happens during the time change this time of the year. There's also, of course, with sleep deprivation, changes in your cognition and attention, and that's reflected in the fact that there's been an increase in errors that have also been reported in an inpatient setting. There are also knockdown effects on our mood, where it's been noted that there's an increase in suicides during this time change. And just from a other behavioral standpoint, children, especially the younger children, they require more sleep than adults in general, and they are also actually what we call sleep phase delayed compared to adults, meaning they tend to have wake times that are later in the morning. And so this actually exacerbates the problem, and it's been shown by having poor effects on their sleep when it occurs, as well as poor performance in school. As an organization, we favor not doing a seasonal time change and moving in general to a permanent time period, because, as I've mentioned, there are a lot of these knockdown effects. And when it comes to daylight savings, it takes longer for the patient's body clock to reset compared to standard time. So aside from just getting rid of a seasonal time change, we would advocate for getting rid of the seasonal time change, meaning making it permanent, but permanently keeping it at standard time, which is not what we're going into. What we're in right now is standard time, and we'd like for it to remain that way based on all of that evidence that I just did a laundry list of. I think there are some general things that can apply to everybody, regardless of your medical comorbidities. And so one of the most important things, and I know it's easier said than done, is to get an adequate amount of sleep. But leading up to the daylight saving time change, there's some other things that you can do, which are kind of painful, but they can help in the long run. So one of those is to gradually adjust your bed and rise time by maybe 15 or so minutes earlier every night leading up to the time change. You can also similarly adjust your daily routines. So there's a lot of behavioral cues like our meal times that help our body to align to a natural circadian rhythm. And of course, as I mentioned before, the light exposures end up being the opposite of what you want it to be naturally. So once this does occur, make sure that you're getting yourself exposed to bright light in the morning. Ideally outdoor exposure, but indoor is fine as long as you expose yourself to bright light. And then again, in the evenings, as your body is winding down, less light is the key. And that includes, for a lot of us, scrolling through a laptop or a cell phone when you can't go to sleep at night. The light is not helpful at all for helping you to go to sleep. I think that it's important for people to get an adequate amount of sleep in general, and that when it comes to the seasonal time change, all of the science points to permanent standard time. I think those are sort of the two big important takeaways when this comes up every single, well, actually twice a year.